could state your main to the substitute motion to send to the vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. Don't quite understand the substitute motion. For one, if we take this to the people, this will incur additional costs because this will be an election. We had plenty of time to talk about doing this prior to this, but now we're here in the ninth inning, the bottom of the ninth, 2 on base, 2 strikes, 3 strikes, and 3 balls. And now we want to say, let's punt it and give it to the public. The public elected us to represent them.
Again, the conversation is here now, so if you could.
During the election, if the election happens and it still passes, we still gonna have the same litigation, same cost. So we're not doing anything by doing that. The people will then vote to say to move it. They will still have a lawsuit. So it's still back right where it's at in the beginning. So why not, and I've been saying this for the longest before we had the advisory committee, quit kicking the can down the road. Let's vote. As simple as that. Let's vote.
Commissioner Gage-Watt.
Thank you, sir. Though Commissioner Johnson has summed it up with a lot of my sentiments exactly to say that we have been kicking this can down the road for quite some time, and today is the time to move forward. I think that a lot of double standards has been said when we bring this back before us to say, let's send it back to the people when it's been put in our hands already. So today is the day to do it, and I'll hold the rest of my comments for the next motion. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Bolton.
I too echo those thoughts as far as I'm gonna try and stay germane, Mr. President. I know, but it's just for me, in support of the amendment. What gets me is the fact that I know that my mom in 2011 led the charge and worked with people. And the thing about her is when my brother and I were growing up, I know you're gonna cut me off, but I'm still, you know. My mother, she used to read to us. She taught us how to read. We went I traveled the whole world, my brother and I. And we traveled the whole world and never left Queensboro because she gave us culture. She let us know that regardless of who you are and where you are, that she taught us about England and everywhere else and monarchies and how to study and to be able to know about history, to preserve history. But in preserving history, she also taught us about there's a time where history is supposed to be, but then the rules of history do not apply and they're not applicable for us in the present, for our future. And to be progressive on the amendment, I cannot support that amendment because, as Commissioner Johnson said, the people did elect us. We are going to spend more money if we put this back out there for them to vote. And it's, for me, I'm just going to be honest, it seems like we've just been passing the buck, BSing, taking time. This has been should have been over with by now. The people elected us to do this. We need to do what they elect us to do and be their voice. And that's where I stand. I'll hold the rest of my comments till later.
Thank you. Commissioner Lewis Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank all the people that made their comments on today, and as well as my fellow commissioners for the spirit in which we've been able to have this discussion. I very much appreciate that. And I think that my points and my thoughts have been echoed for the most part, and that whatever initiative, whatever avenue we take, it's going to take money. It's going to cost additionally, so we have that. And for you, Commissioner Chavez, to say that it's tough for you, I can appreciate that.
It is.
But it's tough for me too. And that I'm in a unique position in that I'm now in a position of having to face voters far sooner than anyone else here. So it's a tough call. But that's why we're here, to make tough calls in that respect. And as it relates to our vote being our voice, it's not only our voice, it's the voice of those people that have put us in this position. And in many cases, it's the voice of those who did not have a voice at any other time. So we are at this point and at this time, I can appreciate each position here. And I just think that this is where we are. So because we are here to represent our districts, and you have already identified where your district is in that position, I cannot support your position for that reason. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Parliamentarian?
Yes, I actually share the sentiment of Commissioner Atkins as he made an impassionate plea to the people who fathers went off the war, that they never got a chance to go, know, and the like. But I put it in this context. I also speak to the legions of African American people who were not afforded the opportunity to vote in 1906 and to be governed by a police jury that we all know was all white. That's always that you're never too late to go back and correct history. For the note, in 1906, African American men bounded by the Constitution could legally vote in the United States. Why didn't they vote in the 1906 election? Because of the systematic process designed by the people, by the governing body of Caddo Parish that barred them from voting. So now is the time for the legions of dead African Americans who didn't have any representation. Now is the time to go back and correct a vote that probably would have went another way had they had the opportunity to vote, since they were 6 to 8% of the population. I think it's time for us to go ahead and vote today and to feel the same passion that these people feel out here for the African American community. It's time for this body to decide and correct the vote that took place in 1906. And I won't be voting for the amendment.
All right. I'm going to rise in opposition to the substitute motion as well. 2 weeks ago, or I believe it was 2 weeks ago, when Commissioner Matthew Lynn introduced the ordinance that we just struck from the agenda, it was my right-hand man here who was loud and impassionate and made it known that that's going to be a cost if we take this thing to the voters. And so here we are, somehow saying, let's take this.
They need to talk.
Again, here they are saying, here we are saying, let's kick this to the voters. And so, you know, I think it's ironic that my conservative colleagues up here, fiscal conservative colleagues, are here saying, let's spend some revenue, parish revenue, to put an issue before the voters at the same time that we may have millage renewals. And so it seems like we're back and forth on these issues and not consistent. And so I cannot support the substitute motion. We can look at the voter rolls and we can look at voting outcomes to tell why we would prefer this thing to go to a vote of the people, but I would probably counter that as well. But we have an opportunity here today to right a wrong. We have been put in a position, and at a later point, I look forward to speaking to Commissioner Chavez the issue of ownership and sort of correcting some of what I heard as I was walking out about the resolution that the group passed in 1903, because there is a case from 1907 in which I believe the land was decided. Commissioner Milton for the first time.
Thank you. I'll be supporting Mario's amendment, and but I'll be also voting to not remove the memorial. I've got some comments here I want to say. Thank you to the many people, though.
Make sure, before you start off, make sure they're germane to the substitute.
As much as everybody else has gone. Thank you, everyone that has voiced your opinions, your attitudes and everything here in the last 14 months or so. The atrocities of slavery in the U.S. can never be denied or forgotten unless the subject of history continues to be assaulted in the interest of political motives. The U.S. is unique in which we were the first major population country to eradicate slavery. The Civil War was the costliest war America has ever fought. If you look at the numbers that died in World War I's and World War II's, together about the same number of people died in those two wars combined. Around 600,000 people died in the Civil War and around 600,000 in World War II and World War I. A majority of Americans think Confederate monuments should be preserved in public places. According to a Reuters, however you say that, opinion poll, a view that is at odds with efforts in many cities to remove them. The August 18th poll this year found that 54% of adults said Confederate monuments should remain in all public spaces, while 27% say they should be removed from all public places. Another 19% said they didn't know. Another poll in Huffington Post, a third of Americans favor removing statues and memorials of Confederate leaders, with 49% opposed. Just 29% of Americans favor changing the names of streets, schools, and buildings commemorating Confederate leaders, which half are opposed. Mothers held bake sales to raise money for these monuments. Women wanted to honor their husbands and children who didn't return. That was a way for the South to be able to grieve. As far as spending a lot of money to take down monuments, moving them, and then spending a lot more money to put them back up somewhere else in public view, just doesn't make any sense. The people who find these objectionable in the public view do now will find them equally as objectionable if they're in a museum context. I understand about justice. Caddo District Court holds about 60 jury trials a year, over 1,800 in the last 30 years. I polled the current clerks that work in the clerk of courts. None of them remember the Confederate Memorial being an issue, not even in an appellate court process. I have a quick letter here from one of our more knowledgeable attorneys in the parish. He writes, as a private citizen respectfully representing to the commission, almost 15 years, and this is Arthur Carmody. Almost 15 years ago, the commission unanimously approved the employment of United Title Company, a highly respected title firm, to render its opinion on the ownership of the monument. This was accomplished through United's officer so-and-so. That due to acquisitive prescription of over 10 and 30 years, that the title was vested in the United Daughters Confederacy. And that's why we think, one day, we need to let the citizens decide. To ignore the opinion of your expert at this time and to vote to take and do whatever with the monument would be a dishonor, and to the conclusion of the owner agent that we had hired. As a public body, ignoring the opinion of your expert, one you selected and paid for, is reckless to the extreme and a violation of your duty to act in the public's interest. And to you, Mr. Carmody, I'll write this. My response to this body is serial, and that it usually rejects opinions of committees and subcommittees. The Charter Review Committee, the Monument Subcommittee, and the Long Range Committee membership were changed by the President to reflect how he wants this monument removed. This memorial has stood over 110 years. Every citizen has a right to vote and to own property. It has, and that's what has occurred since it. It has seen protests and the civil rights amendments. If I thought its removal would end the woes of today's society, especially Caddo Parish, assaults and murders are going on here. Sexual trafficking and exploitation, elective abortions of illegitimate births, sexually transmitted diseases, but would bring a resurrection to God, then I'd borrow a bulldozer and help to move it. Again, this is the next step in removing history, where it is now people can actually stand on the historic ground where the Confederacy surrendered and not have the annotation at a museum stating 6 miles from this location is where the Confederacy surrendered. Of the District 8 people who have contacted me, about 96% want the memorial to remain. They want us to get about the real business of government and not political ideologies. Several have reminded me of the parish's continuing lack of success at tax elections, even when the elections were rededication, wouldn't cost them any money, and still we were able to lose those elections. Let the citizens decide. That's what it should be about. In closing, I'm not going to say that a closing comment, but anyhow, thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate you.
Okay. Commissioner Vice President Dominic, second time around.
Yeah, I wanted to say, all contrary to you, Commissioner Jackson, that when we put this back on the ballot, I don't think it would cost us any more money. It would be on at the same time that a renewal would be. Same argument that y'all made when I was objecting to this. And Commissioner Johnson, Lyndon Johnson, to you, you were the one that punted this issue. It was before us about a month ago, and you made the motion, if I recall, to put it on today. So you know, talking about punting it down the road and making a decision today, I'm just simply saying that it was before us a month ago. So all I have to say on this issue, I would rather say at this point that it go to the vote of the people. Let those, like Commissioner Chavez said, were not able to vote at that time. The women and the African American decide where they should go.
They did now though.
All right. Commissioner,
They won't be able to vote.
Hey, you want to talk?
Commissioner Lyndon Johnson, second time.
Call for the question on the substitute.
Second.
Moved
What
by
about Chavez for
Commissioner-
the first time?
Yeah, you spoke on your substitute.
I spoke on it, but
Yeah.
I hadn't spoke on my first time.
When you speak, that is your first time. That is your first time.
I'll give you that then.
Sure. All right.
Mr.
All right.
President, get him to repeat the substitute motion.
Okay. Please repeat your substitute motion.
I will vote on call for the question.
Hold on, one moment.
Call for the
Commissioner
question.
Smith, we're calling for the question at this point.
Motion by Johnson.
Second by Commissioner Gage Watts to call for the question. Please vote to call for the question. All right, that passes 12-0. Commissioner Chavez, would you please repeat your?
Yes,
substitute
President.
motion?
The subsequent motion is to send this to the parish so the people can vote on it.
All right. All right, so a yes vote would adopt the substitute motion. A no vote would not adopt it. So a
Right.
yes vote would send this to a vote referendum. A no vote means it stays here.
Wait a
Right.
minute. Do it one more time, Mr. President. It's
Do
a
you
soap
want to explain
opera.
that, Todd?
Just vote yes.
Vote no.
Vote no.
Yes.
If you want an
Is
election, yes.
postpone to bring it later, because it needs to be by resolution calling for an election.
Right, right.
So you need to postpone to bring a resolution to call an election.
So a yes vote would postpone in order to call for a election. A
Special
no vote means we go to the original motion.
Everybody understand it.
Everybody
Yeah,
understand?
we're being hoodwinked,
All right.
bamboozled,
All right.
led astray.
Anybody hadn't voted?
No.
Bone?
Can we vote twice?
No.
No, that'd be legal. Get the Trump commission down here. Mr. Bowman?
Yeah, to the people. But can we go back?
All right, that fails 5-6. All right, back to
Mr.
the
Clerk.
original motion.
Mr. Clerk.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Can you go back, please?
Sorry,
Can you go back? Because I'm pressing this and it did not go through right.
it's yours. What
Okay.
is your vote?
Yeah.
It
Abstain.
says abstain, and I never abstain for anything. I'm not a coward.
No.
Okay, so what's your vote? What's your vote?
No.
Okay. So that
So
fails
it's
6-6.
5-7. It fails.
5-7,
5-7,
okay.
yeah.
So that fails 5-7, all right? Now we're back to the original motion, all right?
Some trickery up here.
All right. Commissioner Johnson, do you want to speak on your original motion?
Yes, yes. We've had many citizens from Caddo Parish come to talk today, and you know, over the period of time, I've told my colleagues that the citizens of Caddo want this statue moved. Today, you've heard that from many of the citizens of Caddo Parish. In 1861, January 26, Louisiana decided to leave the Union. When they did that, they then became a rebel. In doing that, right now, we don't honor anyone who is a rebel against the United States. Right now, we don't do that. So why would we do that now, from history? We made concession with this monument because initially the commission wanted to tear it down and be done with it. But knowing that that would never pass, the concession was to move it. So there has been some compromise on this particular deal. We have heard that there's over 13,000 signatures to move the monument, favor to move the monument. We all received an email the other day that's 4,000, that 4,000 signatures to keep it where it's at, which is also national. Okay, so both of them apples to apples. When you dig down into it, there's not that many on the against on that list. If you go down, read through that list, there's not that many in Shreveport or Caddo Parish that's on that list. In 1900, there was 10 black registered voters. 1902, there was 15. In 1904, there was only 7 in Caddo Parish. So how did they have a right to speak to say, don't put that up? We also heard today that the same day that they erected that, there were lynchings. So that was probably 3 blacks were lynched that particular day. So that was probably someone that was protesting against that. We also know from history and knowing that there has been unfair justice done to blacks over a period of time. We today have a chance to undo all those wrongs. And by moving it from a public building is a chance to do that. We're not destroying it, as some people have said and came up here over the last 9 months to say, you taking away history, you're doing that. We're not doing that. We're moving the monument from the courthouse, which should be an unbiased facility, to a museum where it should be, or the art gallery. Either one, fine with me. We shouldn't have to keep bringing up about Bloody Cattle. I mean, that was in the past, but at the same time, it can also be the future. Because if we don't make a stance today to say that we need this moved, then what are we really saying? That we agree with Bloody Cattle, and we agree with slavery, and we agree with everything that the Confederacy did. We also heard about who owns the land. And I know Commissioner Jackson is going to get into it even more, but I have a few documents here. And this was back in 2002, where the United Title Search was done. And then we also have a rendering from the then parish attorney that basically said that the land belongs to Caddo Parish, which is block 23. That whole block, as you see on this diagram, says that it belongs to Caddo Parish. So to hide behind different things to say that, well, I'm gonna vote no for this particular reason, it's not a good reason. We wasted months on this. Yes, I did postpone this to the 19th because I figured everybody would have everything out of the way. We can vote on it and get it done. But to now come in the ninth inning and then say, well, let's take it to the public. We could have done that 9 months ago. But that was not the choice of this body at the time. The choice of this body was go with an advisory committee that was stacked because they had people on there that was sons of the Confederacy and daughters of the Confederacy on that particular committee. So now, here we are today, faced with making this vote. And these people have elected us to make these tough decisions. If not, there's no reason for us to be here. We can always sit here and push a button, when it's easy. But when it's hard, you want to say, well, let's do this, let's do that. This is what we are elected to do. Make hard decisions for the parish. And if this is too hard, then this job might not be for some people.
Commissioner Gage Watts.
Wow, thank you, Mr. President. I love this city. I often talk about how Shreveport, Louisiana were amongst my very first few words. I love Caddo Parish, and I serve because of my love for the people. And I want to be able to help to make better choices, to make this parish grow. And that includes if there's a component that is hindrance to its growth. I've heard so much about erasing history since the beginning of this conversation. While we cannot hide from our history, nor should we, the time has come to make clear the difference between properly acknowledging our past and glorifying the darkest chapters of our history by revisiting and rectifying the wrongs, as it is our responsibility as leaders. It's time to remove the curse of Bloody Cattle, known for the way blacks were slaughtered, the hate, the bigotry, the division, the intimidation. Do you know I had an uncle who stayed away from Caddo Parish for 37 years because of this stigma? I'm so grateful to every citizen who stood up today to voice your thoughts about the removal, as well as the ones who voiced their opinions about it staying in place. The wisdom from the 81-year-old touched my heart and reminded me of my grandmother and the history that she shared. Then the young lady that spoke from her heart, I believe she was a millennial, That explained the intimidation of defeat that has poured through her community and stood up to show that she cared. This gives me confirmation of the war we are already in. So when you stand before me to describe heads being blown off, see, I've witnessed that more times than I count to know. I hear the rhetoric of love, unity, and respect, but in the same voice, I'm told if I'm offended by the monument, then maybe I should use the back door. That's a door that has been used for way too long. That's the one that was used when blacks didn't have a voice because empirical data has dots instead of numbers when this monument was erected. I'm not against the monument. I'm saying it's not in its correct place. I'm not asking you to destroy it. I'm asking you to move it. Put it somewhere where I can tell my children what it stood for, as many other artifacts that I tell them about when we visit the Louisiana State Museum right here in Shreveport. So I speak today for the voiceless, the screams from those trees, the slaughtering of the many Negroes. Will it improve in quality? Will it improve in justice? Will things change for the better? Faith allows me to believe that this too shall pass. Faith allows me to believe that this is why the government I rest up on, Jesus' shoulder, and this will be a start to becoming better. Faith allows me to believe better days are truly ahead. Let's bury the stench of it and allow life to be restored here. Our children, the youth, are our future. Without them, this place is no existence. They deserve better. We owe them to show them that we care. Give them hope to stay or return by starting today. Moving forward and letting go of old keys, and let's open some new doors of true unity, true peace, and true love. I'll be voting yes for the removal of the monument because the people who elected me has spoken and because it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Please, if you guys would, if you all would please keep the comments out there. We have sheriff's deputies who are there. They're there to police the audience. Let them police the audience. We do not need citizen police out here. I want to speak in favor of removal of this monument from our courthouse. I have long said that my issue with this monument and the individuals who are dedicated on this monument undermines a basic principle, and anybody who has an appreciation or for the law and the fundamental of the law can understand where I'm coming from. The 14th Amendment guarantees all individual Americans the right to due process and equal justice under the law. The individuals on that statue and the organization for which that statue was dedicated to, the Confederacy, the failed Confederacy, was not in favor of ratification of the 14th Amendment. And so when individuals go to the courthouse, you have a symbol of injustice standing in front of a place of justice. And so they already feel like they're at a competitive disadvantage. And so, as I have said, Commissioner Milton, when you visit the Supreme Court, the only court mentioned in the United States Constitution, you will not find a statue dedicated to the first Chief Justice. You will not find a statue dedicated to Earl Warren or any of the other Chief Justice. You go over to Congress, and you may find some statues or some busts. You can go over to the White House. You may find some statues, but you will not find one statue dedicated to a person in front of the Supreme Court. It's Lady Justice standing out there. And Lady Justice is blindfolded to represent the blindness of justice, and she's holding the scale to represent equal justice, which is the pillar of the 14th Amendment. And we need to always keep that in context, that that place is a place of justice, not a place of politics and personalities. I want to speak to the issue of the land ownership. I hold in my hand, and I've passed out to all of the commissioners, Caddo Parish, lawsuit involved with Caddo Parish, Frank Aiken versus Caddo Parish Police Jury, suit number 11409. And there's a whole lot of stuff going around, and I saw the KSLA, and Nick, if you're here, I'll be glad to provide this to you as well. But I see where there's a title opinion, I see where there's an attorney opinion, but this is the only thing that's binding in law, because this came from the Second Circuit, this came from the district court and was appealed to Louisiana Second Circuit. And I want to start here where it says, the first page, I want to start where it says, on the second page it says, the property was divided into 6 or more blocks separated and served by the appropriate streets and alleys. All blocks were further subdivided into lots except block 23. And Todd, if you can put the graphic up to show what the address and what the location of block 23 is. All lots were divided into block 23 except block 23, designated on the plat as a public square, which was left intact. This area was then part of Natchitoches Parish, out of which Caddo Parish, with its present boundaries, was created by an act of the Louisiana legislature. And so if you can see right here, block 23 is the Caddo Parish courthouse and the courthouse square. And so for individuals to say that we own a piece of property on that courthouse square, I see nowhere where the plat was subdivided. Do we have any maps from the MPC that shows where this square was subdivided to different ownership or some sort of, is there any? No. Okay, I want to go over to, there's a part where I have it highlighted in red. It says the title of the property. This is the last page, front page of the last page. It says the Caddo Parish Police Jury has in fact exercised jurisdiction and control over and has administered the public square for 124 years as a location for public buildings. The city of Shreveport is not before this court in this action or as a party litigant. The city is not claiming any jurisdiction or authority over this property or the courthouse situated thereon. So this is about the issue of the title. It then further goes on to say the title of the property having been dedicated to the public, the governing authority, which at this time was the police jury representing the parish, continues in the public represented by the parish and not the lesser segment of the public. That is, of the town represented by the governing authority. To hold otherwise would be to deprive a larger segment of the public of the use of enjoyment of the property and to place it on a smaller segment of the public represented by the municipality. What is this saying? What did those justices say? Is you cannot take this property from the parish of Caddo. We have exercised ownership and dominion over this property for well over 100 years. And to come in and claim prescriptive possession or adverse possession is not possible. So I look forward to if we go to court. I think we have capable attorneys who will argue this issue. Because if you ask me, this issue, when you walk in with this case, this issue is dead already at the district court. You got to meet us at the Second Circuit Court already. Oh, writ denied. Already. Already. It has been determined who owns the title to this land. It has not been subdivided. There are no deeds that say that it was given to anybody. This property is owned by Caddo Parish. And so let's stop making this illusion as to who owns it. Let's do the right thing here in this place. And the reason why I asked everybody to stand a moment ago, because I wanted to put everything in context. You got young people, old folks, and I don't mean old in a bad way, but wisdom, seniors.
Time's up.
Time's up. Move to extend.
Thank you. Second.
Well,
Stand there,
objection. You're the one that said we had,
We have a motion on the floor.
7 minutes for everybody.
Well, there was a
7
motion
There's a
to
motion on the
extend,
floor.
and
Move
there's
to
a second
extend.
to extend. Please vote to extend
To
7
a
minutes.
vote. Cut all
I
that
just
out.
need one. I just need a minute to finish up here.
1 minute.
Please vote.
1 minute.
All right.
And
on the
one
motion to
mic.
extend.
We voting on 1 minute?
1 minute.
Voting
All right.
to extend. All right. That passes. All right. What I saw was
Just time for you to solve.
yeah 9-3. What I saw was young folks, our seniors of wisdom. I see men, I see women, I see African Americans, I see Caucasians standing up to say, remove this. This is what Caddo Parish looks like in 2017, not the Caddo Parish of 1903 or 1901. We have to govern for what we have today in this present day and not try to continue to litigate 1901 or 1902. This is where we are in our present day. And so there's this sort of idea that all Caucasians, all white folks want it to stay. And that's not true. There's a cross section of this town. And one of my colleagues said they want to speak for the majority. But my district didn't even have a public hearing on this issue. So they were disenfranchised. MLK didn't have a hearing on this. So they were disenfranchised again during the public comment section the last 9 months. And so to say that you want to speak for the majority, we don't even know what the majority is. And I'm questioning what majority are you talking about? Because the majority of people that I see want it moved. And that is a very inclusive group of individuals. Again, let's vote our conscience. This is 2017. We need to be about the business of not fighting the Civil War again. Let's put bloody Caddo in his respective deathbed. And let's move on down the road. Rest assured, you can rest assured I'm going to be bringing some stuff that talks about housing, economic development. But are you going to be ready to move on them? Because then we'll be saying, wait, hold up again. So rest assured, it's coming. And we can discuss the real issues of crime. So let's vote to move this and let's start the process. And let's not wait another 3 or 4 years to then say, wait again. Let's be about the business of moving this monument. Thank you.
I yield my time to, no.
One more outburst, sir, and I'm gonna have to ask the
I know,
deputies
he's
to
off the
please-
chain.
One more outburst, sir, and I'm gonna have to ask the deputies to remove it. All right? Mr. Parliamentary.
Okay.
I think he's out of time.
All right. All right, well, thank you very much. I will be voting for removal, and I think most of the dynamics of this has been discussed and has been lamented, and but I will tell you curiously, the reason why I've been walked to removal is from the words of both Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis. We keep talking about history. In 1866, Robert E. Lee said, and I will loosely quote him, he said, in other words, I will be grateful that you will put a monument to my honor. But I think I would be more concerned and more interested in the healing of the South as opposed to erecting a monument to my memory. In 1865, Jefferson Davis, President of the Confederacy, and I quote, I think it's wise not to keep open the sores of war, but to follow the examples of those nations who endeavored to obliterate the marks of civil strife and to commit to the feelings that have been engendered by the people of the South. So in other words, I've actually listened to the words of the Confederate General and the President of the Confederacy at the time. In other words, that monument, had they still been living, they wouldn't have wanted it erected anyway. Another thing I've heard a lot about, this is about history, and over this 9 months to a year period, I've heard some whitewashed history, pardon my pun, that I am baffled about. The number of African Americans who actually fought on the side of the Confederacy. Let me give you the empirical data. 198,000 African Americans fought on the side of the Union. Less than 3,000 African Americans voted on the side of the Confederate. That's empirical data. today, there was a gentleman came up who said something that just baffled me to no end. He said that an African American was the first to own slaves in the United States. Now, I thank God for my HBCU education at Dillard University. I was taught the story of Anthony Johnson in 1987.
Well.
In 1651, Anthony Johnson purchased a contract of 5 indentured servants, one of which was his son. Now, you have to differentiate between what's a slave and what's an indentured servant. Indentured servitude started in the 1500s in the United States, and you go all the way back to the Bacon's Rebellion. That only meant that if you came to America, you had to work free labor for a protracted period of time, after which you were set free. So for that person to come in today and suggest that African Americans were the first to own slaves, that's not history. Secondly, just as a matter of fact, you know the first people to own slaves in America was the Dutch West Indian Company. They were the people that brought the 20 slaves to Virginia in 1619. But I'll lastly say this. More than anything else in this discussion, I hope people don't miss, and this is the Bible Belt, I hope people don't miss what this is all about. This is really about the cleansing and spirituality of this local community. This speaks to how we as a community communicate with one another and relate to one another. We got to get beyond talking at people and start talking to people. If we get anything out of this debate, it's that in Caddo Parish, whether you want the monument up or you want it down, we got to do a better job of communicating with one another and decide collectively how we move down the road. And for some people, this may perturb them or disturb them, but I think this is the first day of the rest of our life in Caddo Parish. So we vote to move this down, take it down today. We can move forward in what is the true American dream in Caddo Parish.
Thank you. See Commissioner Lynn, I think Vice President Dominic wanted out. Commissioner Lynn, Bowman, were you before Lynn?
Yes.
Okay, Bowman before Lynn.
Yeah, so,
Bowman then Lynn.
And just so we can move on, as I was saying earlier, basically we've come to a point, and I like to believe that in 2017, we have history, and this is part of history, but we have to look at moving towards the future. And my generation doesn't care about race. My friends come from all different backgrounds. They are white, black, Latino, it doesn't matter, gay, straight, whoever they are, if they're human, and they treat me with respect, I treat people with respect. And that's the way I've always, and we've been reared. When we look at, you're saying back in 1900, to give it a chance for the people, back in 1900 and 1902, it was only 15 registered, as it said, colored people able to vote in that time. We weren't even considered humans or men, or we were considered less than. And so now we have the opportunity, it's not for African Americans, it's for all minorities, it's for all people who, when you go to the courthouse, I'll just be honest, as I said this before, it's not just as a black man, it's as anybody. I always put myself in other people's shoes. And as a kid, I tell you what, I used to play with the Dukes of Hazzard toys. I knew Bo, Luke, Daisy Duke. I had the General Lee car. I had all of that. You know what I'm saying? And that's because my mama didn't allow, she allowed us to learn on our own. But then I've read a scripture that also says that when I was a child, I understood as a child. I spoke as a child. But when I became a man, I put away all childish things. And so now I know better to do better. And yeah, that's still history. That still was a great show. I watched the television series as a kid, North and South. But at the end of the day, what it boils down to is us coming together, even in our disagreement of whatever this is. You cannot sit here, have a heart, and not say you don't want this. It's not destroying it. It can be across the street at the library. But this is a public place, a courthouse, and when I walk across there, and when people walk across, they need to be able to feel that a place for that's for justice and equality, they don't have to be reminded of just a partial piece or a partial piece of history. And it's just time for us to do the right thing. We've been started this journey, and it's time for us just to come together. Y'all, it's a no-brainer. We just got to do it. Just do the right thing.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner McEwen.
Thank you. I promise to be germane to the subject, though I am going to loop it rather than go through the heart of it.
The true swing vote.
With that, I want to start off and thank all military veterans and everybody that participated in every aspect of this process. This will be the fourth time that I have voted on this particular issue. With that, we sent it, and as president last year, I kicked it to a committee, and while it was in the committee, everybody pretty much locked their heels, and everybody had their own point of view, and nobody swayed really from their point of view. While they were doing their studying, I was doing my own studying, and I guess the turning point came. I read the Federal Executive Order 11478, and it talked about justice and a clear vision for all and a clean plate for everybody to work off of. And I listened to probably a little over 100 people. And when I say I listened to a little over 100 people, I listened to a little over 100 completely different people. Some people that I knew, some people that I didn't know. And since listening to those people, I've heard a couple of things that has resonated in my mind that, you know, that I debate, is that keeping a monument or leaving a monument or moving a monument does not change history. History is whatever it is. The history that I experienced from my ancestry is different than the history of a person's who has a different ethnic background that lives in our community. My history is different from their history. But the history is still going to be the same no matter what it is. I've also heard that this is a knee-jerk reaction that we as a community, that Caddo Parish as a community is acting on this right now because other communities are acting on this right now. And to that I say, absolutely I agree, in that I take it into this context. About 35 years ago, I broke about 50 bones in my body. And every day people are like, hey Matthew, how you doing, how you doing? And I'm always doing great. I feel great. Everything is pretty good in my life. I don't say I hurt, but I do. And I look at the monument in that same context. It's been there 112 years, 102. Nobody said anything because you couldn't do anything about it. But I can promise you that if all of a sudden I read where people that broke 50 bones, you could take this pill or vote this way or do this or do that, and all that pain would go away, I would do it. But I'm not going to jump out there all by myself without seeing those successes. And so I recognize that the pain has been there, whether you want to recognize it or not, that it does exist. And people have to go on with their life. And so it's only brought up when people see successes in other communities and successes of removing that pain. And so I recognize that this is not just a knee-jerk reaction. I recognize that this is an aspect of people seeing success in removing the pain in other communities, and they want to remove that pain in this community. Now, I come from a military family. My father was in World War II at the age of 17. He got out after World War II. He got tricked back into going into the war without them telling him they were going to start the Korean War. He went back to the military, and he fought in the Korean War. And so I was very much a military family, and I salute, and I'm very grateful for everybody who has ever served in any war, no matter what, because you did what you thought was right at the time. Now, whether or not it proved that it was a good cause or a bad cause, 100, 200 years down the road, that doesn't factor in. You did the right thing for the right reason when you did it. And so I salute everybody that has been in the military, especially my dad. There is one portion of Caddo Parish that views the monument as a sense of pride. And there is another aspect of our community that believes that it marginalizes them. I view it as a stick of granite. I know that a lot of us view it as a carved piece of granite, but I have to factor in that there are people that live in our community that think it is something that makes them better than somebody else. And I have to view also that there are people in our community that feel that it marginalizes them. The fact that it is on the courthouse grounds is my issue. The sanctity and the purity of the courthouse must remain pure, that nobody for any reason, whether perception only, whether it may be reality, whether it's a glimmer of even a thought, should ever think that the decision on whether or not they are legal, or whether they have broken the law or not broken the law, guilty, innocent, there's nothing on the courthouse grounds that should reflect any decision already being made. I had one friend say, do what your heart says. I had a close relative tell me, Matthew, you're a Southern boy and you got to vote like a Southern boy. My decision is not based on either what's in my heart. My decision is not based on me being a Southern boy. My decision is based simply on the fact that I value the purity that a courthouse is supposed to stand for. And that anything that deters or steers us away from the purity that a courthouse is supposed to stand for, any distraction at all, no matter how big or how small, it must not exist. Not on the courthouse lawn, not walking in the front door. That's my 7 minutes.
That it, Commissioner Lee?
That's everything.
Okay. Commissioner Chavez.